On today's show, we take a look at Nic Claxton and the Rockets' reported interest in possibly pursuing the Brooklyn Nets big man. Does he make sense as a fit here in Houston as the backup to Alperen Sengun? Also, we'll take a look at the NBA draft profiles for Jeremy Sochan and Ousmane Dieng coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
With the second pick in the 2021 NBA Draft, the Houston Rockets select Jalen Green.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
I'm going to keep working. I'm going to keep getting better every day. I'm going to keep perfecting my craft. And every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
What's up, and welcome to another edition of Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. As always, I'm your host, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian and credentialed media member. I'm also the host of Locked On NBA Mondays, host of the State of the Rockets podcast, as well as the founder of ClutchCityControlRoom.com. Be sure to follow along on Twitter at JT Gatlin, and the show, of course, at Locked On Rockets. As always, we appreciate you for making LOR your first listen each and every day, free and available on all platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, everywhere you listen to your podcasts. We're also on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all of that. And remember, as always with the comments, thank you so much for the comments. They help a ton. Remember, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Go comment that. It would mean the world to me. For today's episode, we're going to get into Nic Claxton and the Rockets' recently reported interest in pursuing a backup center in free agency of all places, and that they're not going to be targeting a center in this year's NBA draft, at least for now, it seems. We'll also take a look at draft profiles for two guys that may be a little bit outside of the range of picks 17 and 26, but given the recent situation with KJ Martin and the fact that the Rockets are still in a position to potentially trade up, we'll take a look at Jeremy Sochan and Ousmane Dieng. So we'll do that in segments 2 and 3. Let's start with Nic Claxton. Also, I can't even take myself seriously with these. Hang on. I've got to take these glasses off. My mom got those as a gag gift for me for my birthday, and so I can see my reflection in the monitor, and I can't take myself seriously wearing them. All right. So let's talk a little Nic Claxton here. So over the weekend, in the immediate aftermath of the Christian Wood trade, Jonathan Fagan reported that the Rockets are actually, pursuing the idea of a center in free agency, and that one of the names at the top of the list is actually current Brooklyn Nets center Nic Claxton, a guy who James Harden made look incredibly enticing as a big man prospect, total rim running big, a lot of flexibility, a lot of versatility in his game. And right now the Rockets don't have like a legitimate backup big with size for Alperen Sengun. And with Nic Claxton, he's a guy that could come in, could provide kind of a different look as the backup to Alperen Sengun, can be kind of that rim-running big, play above the rim a little bit, more of I don't want to say a prototypical big, but just kind of a polar opposite inverse from what you get out of Alperen Sengun in that starting spot. And the Rockets could pursue him with their full mid-level exception, which starts around $10.5 million this offseason. Now, would this be the right move for the Rockets? Like, first off, would you want to see Nic Claxton in a Rockets jersey? Let me know in the comments on YouTube. But I don't know if this would be necessarily the best allocation of their resources, is the best way to put it in my mind. Because, paying a backup center, a starting salary of around $10.5 million to get, 15, maybe 20 minutes a night behind Alperen Sengun. And then not only that, the Rockets are going to be in this really special position where if they do walk away with Paolo Banchero from this year's NBA draft, he's a guy that at times can probably play some small ball 5 minutes if you want to, trot out a really potent offensive lineup and you want to cause some mismatches for the opposing team. Not only that, the Rockets still have Usman Garuba, who didn't get sufficient run last year. So maybe this is a sign that the Rockets know that they need some legitimate size behind Alperen Sengun, because at this point they are kind of undersized on the front lines unless they do manage to retain Boban Marjanovic. He's a guy that, as a specialty big can be used situationally. He's not going to like anchor the paint or anything. And he's very much a kind of like utility big, but he does give the Rockets some much needed size on the interior that you could use sporadically here and there in and against certain matchups. I don't hate the idea of them pursuing Nic Claxton. I'm not absolutely in love with it because I'd rather see them give a legitimate shot to Ousmane Garuba, who showed some serious flashes last season. But maybe via this report from Jonathan Fagan, maybe this shows that the Rockets aren't necessarily as high on Garuba as we once thought, or again, maybe they're just aware of the shortcomings in having, a guy like Alp being your starting center at 6'9", 6'10", Ousmane Garuba being your backup at 6'8", like not having a ton of legitimate size to throw out if you do need some legitimate size to put out there. So Nic Claxton had a solid season with the Nets. He's had some, really impressive outings with them, but overall, this to me isn't the exact right move for the Rockets to make at this current time. Even if you do lock him up at a relatively team-friendly deal at $10.5 million starting out, say you sign him for 2-3 years, something like that. Having that money locked up in a backup big, somebody who realistically, again, is only going to get anywhere from 12 to 15 minutes a night behind Alperen Sengun, realistically. Maybe if there was a world where you could argue that those two guys would be able to play alongside each other a little bit more, which I'm not saying that they couldn't. I'm just not completely blown away by the idea of them, utilizing that much money on a backup center position. I'd much rather see them bring in or, utilize that money by way of a sign and trade to pick up another draft asset or, another couple assets moving forward, or something along the lines of just, adding to their depth at the wing position, seeing as how they've got an unhappy KJ Martin and he might be out the door soon. We still don't know exactly what's going to happen with Eric Gordon, but apparently teams are interested in trying to pry him away from the Houston Rockets. So they really need, or possibly really need, an answer at that 3 spot or potentially the backup 3 spot if Jae'Sean Tate's shot turns out to be true and he's able to be the starting small forward moving forward. I'd just like to see some depth on the wing for this Houston Rockets team. So with that, kind of up and down, lukewarm on the news about the Rockets potentially wanting to pursue a center in free agency and potentially wanting to pursue Nic Claxton specifically. I will say that the Brooklyn Nets are continuing to experience some fallout, and it is just so incredible for the Houston Rockets because Kyrie Irving may walk in free agency this offseason. And if he does, the Nets are, they've already been kind of a dumpster fire for a minute, but now would be a really great time to be the team that owns their draft capital for the next 6 or 7 years. And that, that's the Houston Rockets. That's actually really cool. So shout out to Rafael Stone for absolutely fleecing the Brooklyn Nets at the exact right moment for James Harden when he wanted out of Houston. So with that, that's it for this segment. Coming up, I want to talk about Ousmane Dieng first, and then we'll do Jeremy Sochan in segment 3. Two guys who are maybe a little bit out of the draft range for the Rockets with 17 and 26, but are two very enticing trade-up prospects for the Houston Rockets. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at Prize Picks, because look, if you're looking for a daily fantasy option for the NBA, you need to check out the award-winning app Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. You pick 2 to 5 players and an over-under on their projections, and you can win up to 10 times back on any entry. It's just you versus the projected numbers. Entries can be made in 60 seconds or less. It is that simple. Prize Picks is safe and offers incredibly fast withdrawals. You can use the app on both the App Store and Google Play. PrizePicks even allows mixed sports entries, so be sure to go check them out. And right now, for a limited time, PrizePicks has an exclusive offer for all of our listeners. Listeners get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores just 1 point, just a single point. All you have to use is promo code NBA. That's right. This is an exclusive offer for Locked On listeners only. Sign up today, use code NBA to get $50 for free if a player in your first PrizePicks entry scores just a single point. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And continuing on here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's talk a little Ousmane Dieng, a guy who is one of the more incredibly enticing prospects in this year's NBA draft, although, again, he may be a little bit outside of the range of where the Rockets are going to be picking. A lot of the mocks that I've seen have Dieng kind of projected to be somewhere in the late lottery range. Like I've seen him go as early as like 8 or 9 in certain mocks. I've seen him down around 12, 13, 14, 15 in certain mocks, both professional, fan-made, whatever. So, his range is probably that late lottery-esque area. And again, the Rockets are just outside of that with their first pick at 17, but understandably could trade up if this is a prospect that they're very impressed by. Now, this guy has the exact blend of defense, size, shot creation, playmaking to be a really, really enticing prospect. We just did Nikola Jovic's little like profile, and this would be like if you added defense to Nikola Jovic, which is kind of crazy because Jovic can handle, can play make a little bit. Dieng can handle, can play make, has good court vision, has great size, has a great body, and then has the makings to be a really, really solid defender. But he has the same shortcoming that Nikola Jovic does, and that they're both like just not efficient whatsoever offensively. So let's roll through what makes Ousmane Dieng stand out. So first off, we just run through his physicals. He's 6'10", he weighs about 200 pounds, so a solid frame that you can, reasonably expect to build on. He's a legit forward. Play him at the 3 or the 4 at the NBA level. 7-foot wingspan, so good length all around. Just 19 years old, a skosh over 19. Numbers-wise, for New Zealand, he averaged just 7 points per game, shot 21.3% from the three-point line. Not great whatsoever, just 35.6% from the floor, just under 3 rebounds per game, and about 1 assist per game. So the numbers are not great, like on the surface, right? But it's about the potential that this kid has flashed. So let's run through what makes this guy so interesting, right? So first off, you got his ball handling. He is a very effective dribbler. He's able to get wherever he wants to on the floor, whether he is looking to create for one of his teammates, whether he is looking to get all the way to the rim, whether he's looking to get into kind of the mid-range area and get to like his pull-up game, either pull-up jumper, floater, that kind of thing. He can effectively get wherever he wants. He's adept at keeping his dribble alive and maneuvering around the court, maneuvering around defenses without, picking up his dribble and getting stuck somewhere, right? Which is a nice ability to have, right? It's incredibly frustrating when you see a player, out there on the floor and they immediately pick up their dribble after, 1 or 2 moves, and then they're stuck in no man's land and they need a bailout cut or, somebody at the top of the key to just throw the ball back out to. So he's got good size, and he's able to create space when he wants to for his offensive repertoire, for a pull-up jumper, for a floater, to try and finish at the rim. The shots just are not going in right now. It is concerning. He looks relatively fluid getting to his shots and getting to where he wants to on the floor. So if it's just a matter of like getting the shots to ultimately fall, I think that the rest of the game looks so polished that you have a pretty decent feeling about his ability to, if this kid was making these shots at this point, he'd be a consensus like top 3 pick probably. So right now, just no offensive efficiency whatsoever. Good passing vision, though, is able to spot cutters, is able to see when guys are moving around the floor, kind of hitting them, in moments for them to capitalize on, either at the rim or when they're wide open on the three-point line, that kind of thing. He does have a tendency at times to kind of not throw the ball on target. The passes can be a little sloppy, so it's not, it's not the absolute end of the world. I think when I'm looking at like court vision for a player like Dieng, especially out of his position as a 3-4 type guy, I don't need a guy to be completely like totally on the money. If he's creating opportunities for his teammates, that's already a very, very big thing. With his size, with his length, with that entire blend that he's got, he's going to be a very high-level defender at the NBA level. He's got the quickness and, the agility to stick with fast players when he's on the ball. And as far as his ability kind of off the ball, this is one of those things where, sometimes defensive awareness can be an issue for a lot of these young guys. Like, this is not an issue exclusive to him. There's a handful of guys in this draft that are like some of the true defensive aces that we've covered, like that have the defensive IQ and don't necessarily get, caught up off ball defensively and caught sleeping or whatever. But it's just about that awareness and kind of honing in on defensive schemes. And again, there's a reasonable expectation that rookies are going to struggle for that. Or struggle with that, I should say. But he projects to be a really, really solid NBA level defender with his size, with his length, with his quickness, all of that. A guy who can easily stick with guards, who can stick with wings, who's got the size to deal with some bigger guys, needs to add some weight to his frame. But again, a good foundation is there. Now, offensively, again, the efficiency is rather concerning. He doesn't necessarily use his size to his advantage offensively. He uses the length really well defensively, especially when he's on ball defending. But offensively, he doesn't necessarily do a good job of creating or initiating contact. He doesn't do a good job of using his size to make life easier for him from a physicality standpoint. Now, when he gets to the spots that he wants to, like I mentioned earlier, when he's creating, getting to where he wants to on the floor, and he's, elevating for these jump shots that are just not going in, he looks good doing that. And you kind of see the size on display in moments like that. But as far as like getting all the way to the rim and using his 6'10" frame to maybe, dunk on some guys or finish through contact, that's just not happening currently right now. He does not attempt a ton of free throws, didn't attempt a ton of free throws. And at the end of the day, like, that's something that you need to expect out of a guy with a 6'10" body. Again, maybe adding a little bit more muscle to his frame will help with that as far as his driving ability, getting to the rim. Needs to be able to be more comfortable finishing with both hands too. Like right now, he's predominantly a right-hand finisher around the rim, definitely more comfortable with his right than his left, and adding that added level of comfort of being able to finish going either direction, or, at least getting it to relatively the same level going either direction, will help him out a lot as far as, opportunities when it comes to driving to the rim, creating those opportunities. Again, you put the ball in his hands and he can get to basically wherever he wants to on the floor. Now, because he has the decent court vision and, has pretty solid offensive IQ, this is also a guy that you think could reasonably be effective without the ball in his hands, utilizing him maybe as like a screener, as an off-ball presence, as a cutter, that kind of thing. Didn't do a ton of that, but he has the ability to do so if necessary, and I think he could easily be one of those guys that is able to kind of be an additional piece offensively, where you have somebody else initiating the offense, and then he's kind of that mid focal point where, all right, he rolls hard to the rim and he's got that court vision from the middle of the floor, and either he's going to be able to attack himself, create for another teammate, that kind of thing. But his best skill is when he's got the ball in his hands and he's able to create for his teammates, for others. I do think that if you look at the way that he plays, a couple of the comps that I see floating around from him, Brandon Ingram is a really good one, because they both have that incredibly slender frame, the length, all of that, although Brandon Ingram's significantly better shooter. Chandler Parsons was another name that gets mentioned a little bit. Kind of, again, a guy that's got that, Parsons was about 6'8", 6'9", that lengthy kind of small forward, power forward, tweener type frame, where he's got the length and the size to kind of bother some smaller wings, but he's still got the speed and agility to keep up with them as well, which is what makes him, really interesting from a physicals standpoint. And then one more in here that I'll chime in is Evan Turner. And I don't see the Evan Turner one as much, because Turner a bit smaller, bit of a bulkier build for Evan Turner, not like significantly so, but just Evan Turner had some some upper body strength to him that I think let him kind of battle with, or be a little bit more physical as a wing defender throughout his career than necessarily Ousmane Dieng has right at this very moment. But a handful of comps for this kid. Look, the offensive numbers are not great, and I've tried to hone in on that quite a bit by breaking him down, in the sense that, like, that is a little bit concerning, but you look at the rest of the skill package that's there, and you think that if you can get this kid's shot to a place that it's like decent, then this guy has all the makings to be a really, really high level player. And I'm not talking like just a role player. Like, this guy could have like potential, like star potential, if he gets the shot to be figured out, because somebody who you can put the ball in his hands and he can get to wherever he wants on the floor, is already creating solid opportunities for himself and for his teammates. All he's got to do is knock down the shots himself, and then that adds a whole new level of gravity to his game, which will then just further make the current like court vision playmaking that he already has at his disposal, make it even more lethal if teams have to actually pay attention to him a bit more as a legitimate scoring threat. So a really, really interesting prospect here. I'd love if the Rockets had the ability to maybe trade up and get him. I would love to see this guy in a Rockets jersey. And as far as his fit, right, I've said it in a lot of recent episodes, I want the Rockets to get some wing size, some wing depth, and this would absolutely be a guy that you'd love to, run as maybe a small ball 4. You run him as a really like a supersized 3, total forward tweener, can, slot him into almost any lineup. And again, this is maybe kind of a project type thing. Send him down to the G League, let him try and refine the shot mechanics, get to a place where he's actually making shots on a consistent basis. But outside of that, I'd love him as a kind of a long-term project type guy for the Rockets to try and figure out. So that's it for Ousmane Dieng. Coming up, I do want to talk about Jeremy Sochan, the last draft profile we have for today's episode. We're going to get there in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at rockauto.com, because with the ever-increasing number of makes and models, it's basically impossible for your local chain auto parts store to stock all the parts that your car could possibly need. Save time and money when you use rockauto.com. Why choose to spend 30, 50, even 100% more for the exact same car parts from a chain store or car dealership? Best of all, Rock Auto is a family business. They've been serving do-it-yourselfers online for over 20 years. The prices are always reliably low for every single customer. They don't price gouge you just because you know how to do a little bit of DIY repairs on your vehicle, on your car or truck. They've got everything you could possibly need, from brake parts, tail lamps, motor oil, even brand new carpet. So go explore their easy-to-use website today to find the solutions to your auto parts needs. Go to rockauto.com right now, see all the parts available for your car or truck. And this is the really, really important part. When you go to checkout, be sure to write "Locked On" in their "How did you hear about us" box so that they know that we sent you. Amazing selection, reliably low prices, all the parts your car will ever need. Be sure to visit rockauto.com. And final segment here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Now, let's talk a little Jeremy Sochan from Baylor. This guy is a man after my own heart because, again, another defensive-minded wing, a guy with a ton of potential as a two-way player at the NBA level. Great size, great physicality, just across the board. It checks all the boxes for a guy that I'd love the Rockets to pick up. Even I'd probably take Sochan over Tari Eason if I could. I know that Tari Eason, so the difference between these, Tari Eason has a three-point shot that actually goes in right now. Sochan doesn't. And so that's where kind of the difference is between these two guys. But when I look at Jeremy Sochan, I see like shades of like a young Jeff Green kind of, but with better defensive IQ and instincts and maybe less of a shot. That's kind of like, and he's also been comped to guys like Ben Simmons, Aaron Gordon, or a couple of other names. Like think of those like 6'8" to 6'10" uber athletes that are, mismatch nightmares and can guard multiple positions on the floor, are terrors in transition, either with the ball in their hands or just filling the lanes in transition. Great size to finish in and around the rim. Straight up great athletes. And again, if you got a guy like that in a 6'8" to 6'10" frame, which is exactly what he has. So just going through his physicals here. He's 6'9", 7-foot wingspan, great size all around, weighs about 230 pounds. So he's got an NBA-ready frame, like coming out of the gate. There's not this worry of like, okay, he's got to add the muscle. He's got to, bulk up a little bit to be able to deal with guys in the NBA. No, he's going to come in and he's going to be a force to deal with immediately. He is one of the best defensive prospects in the draft. Again, can guard multiple positions, is going to be great in whatever scheme you want to throw him in, right? If you want to run him out as a small ball 5, great. He's going to be a mismatch offensively and defensively. He'll still be able to hold his own. He'll be able to switch. He'll be able to do whatever you ask of him defensively. Guarding smaller players, he's got the speed, the athleticism to stick with them. Guarding bigger players, he's got the size, the toughness, the defensive instincts, both on ball and off ball, to just, again, throw him into any defensive scheme, and this kid is going to absolutely thrive. Just 19 years old. A great rebounder. Just going through his numbers, he averaged just under 9 points per game, little over 6 boards per game, about 1.3 steals per contest, and then just under a block per game for Baylor this past season. We'll talk about his offensive repertoire here in just a moment, but I want to stick, with the defensive side of things. God, can't say any words today. Stick with the defensive side of things for a moment. He's, again, has all the tools to be a great pick and roll defender, to be a great isolation defender, to defend multiple different types of players, smaller, bigger, faster, quicker, stronger. It doesn't matter. You throw anything at this kid, he's going to be able to handle it. And then one of my biggest things, right, is trying to judge a defender by how well they box out. And he is incredibly adept at boxing out. He's active on rebounds. He fights hard. He does his work early. I've talked about this with Alperen Sengun ad nauseum this past season. I love watching Alpi box out for rebounds, and Sochan does an incredible job of making sure that he closes out defensive possessions strong with rebounds. Now, offensively, he is a playmaker. He's able to, have the ball in his hands. He's got a really solid handle that, utilizes a little bit of, a little fancy footwork at times, some misdirection, some really fluid back and forth movements, some hezzies, crossovers, that kind of thing to be able to generate, openings in space for him. And that's what makes him so interesting is you give, like we take a look at a guy like Christian Wood, right, who's been a mismatch for opposing bigs for a minute for the Houston Rockets. Wood doesn't have like a super fluid, amazing handle. It's kind of herky-jerky at times, right? But it gets the job done because he's faster and quicker than a lot of other NBA bigs. Sochan is a guy, he's got a handle. And so you put him out there and you throw a legit 4 or a legit 5 at him to try and check him defensively, and he's just going to fly right by them. He's going to give him 1 or 2, a boom, boom, and he's going to be right past them at the rim. You put a smaller guy on him, and the physicality might be a little bit too much. Unfortunately, he doesn't have a reliable post game right now. The ability to go back down, take advantage of a smaller player would do him wonders because, like a lot of the guys that we've talked about recently, doesn't have a shot. Just shot 30% from the three-point line at Baylor. Not great shooting percentage whatsoever. Just 31.7% on catch and shoot threes and only 57.5% of his free throws. When he's shooting off the catch, it's kind of this like slow release where he just doesn't get the ball up quick enough, and it doesn't exactly look the same as when he's attacking off the dribble, when he's got the ball in his hands and he gets to a spot and tries to pull up himself. He's shooting 35.7% on pull-up twos and floaters, which is still not a great number. Hasn't taken a whole ton of pull-up threes, so there are some legitimate concerns there about his offensive repertoire. Again, I like the shot when he's doing it himself, when he's like getting into his shot motion, and maybe that's just a thing that they can kind of work on to kind of speed up the shooting motion and get it to a place where it's a little bit more reliable when he's, when he's got the catch and shoot opportunities, because that's exactly what he's going to get a ton of at the NBA level as like that tweener 3-4 on the wing type guy. He's got to be able to convert at a high rate of those threes. Again, 30% isn't nearly as bad as Dieng, all the way down at 21.3%, but it's still not anything to write home about, and it is a cause for concern. But you look at everything else that this guy is bringing to the table, and again, if it's just the shot that you've got to figure out, you're drafting these guys because they're uber athletes, right? It's not like you're looking for a skill position, a niche like shooter who's just going to come in and only be able to shoot and do nothing else on the floor. This is a guy who can do a lot of different things on the floor, a total Swiss Army knife, but he's just got to develop and work on the shooting game. Talked about the fact that he just doesn't have, so as far as just his overall offensive repertoire, right? Like, he can put the ball on the floor, he can drive, he can finish in and around the rim, but he doesn't have a complete, a reliable offensive go-to game right now just yet, unfortunately. And that is kind of the biggest issue with his game is, what is he going to look like offensively if he's not hitting catch and shoot threes, if he doesn't have a reliable go-to game offensively. Yeah, he could put the ball on the floor, he can pass a little bit, he can play make, he can create. But right now I don't want to call him an offensive black hole because that's a little bit too negative. That's approaching Ousmane Garuba territory right now. But the offensive side of things needs work for him. He's definitely a guy that I feel like maybe you don't necessarily send him down to the G League, but he's maybe a guy that could get some reps at the G League level to try and figure out like what his ability is, what his true ceiling is offensively before the Rockets bring him back up for maybe like the second half of the season to kind of see what he's got going on. Defensively, takes some risks at times, but every player that is a capable high-level defender, guys that we've talked about, Tari Eason, Marjan Beauchamp, all these guys are risk takers at times defensively. You have to be. You have to gamble sometimes to play passing lanes, to be aggressive on ball, to pressure opposing players, to create and force turnovers, that kind of thing. And that's exactly what this kid does. But again, I raved about his defense earlier. He's going to thrive in whatever defensive scheme you put him in at the NBA level. And for the Rockets, especially having a guy like Alperen Sengun at your 5 spot now and potentially Paolo Banchero at your 4 spot, you want to surround those guys with high-level, high IQ defensive players. And this is a guy that is going to be able to thrive as an on-ball defender, as an off-ball defender, just has a great overall feel for the game. And if he can get that 3 ball to really translate, he is going to be an absolutely incredible two-way player at the NBA for years to come. High-level role player, borderline all-star type caliber talent if he can get that 3 ball up to a reliable place of like 34, 35, 36%. We're talking about an insanely talented player. So for the Houston Rockets, I would love for them to be able to have the opportunity to trade up to select this guy. I think, again, both Dieng and Sochan are going to be just a little bit outside of the Rockets' range, but it's also incredibly possible one of them falls outside of the lottery, because at this point, there are so many different names moving and shaking and rising and falling. I have no idea how the rest of the lottery is going to play out at this point. So maybe one of these guys is on the board when the Rockets are selecting at 17. I would be really jazzed if the Rockets took either of these guys, especially Sochan, again, just because of all the defensive skills that he brings to the table. I think he's a really, really enticing prospect for this Houston Rockets team. So that's going to do it for today's episode, going over Nic Claxton, the Rockets potentially pursuing him, and, just looking for centers outside of the draft and in free agency, of all places, to back up Alperen Sengun, Ousmane Dieng, and Jeremy Sochan's draft profiles. Let me know what you think about these guys as possible prospects for the Houston Rockets. Let me know in the YouTube comments. As always, appreciate you for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcasts: Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. And check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets, like, comment, subscribe, all that good stuff. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.